It has caused Russian economy to, quite frankly, crater.
Now, at the same time, the U.S. is trying to round up other sources of energy. Over the weekend, two senior U.S. officials met with members of Venezuela's government. We are told they discussed global supplies and Venezuela's ties to Russia. Now, in the U.K., the government also announced a ban on Russian oil imports. However, the U.K. will allow Russian natural gas and coal to be imported, at least for now. The goal then is to phase them out by the end of this year. Other European nations that rely more heavily on Russian fuels will not be participating in this ban. Jules.
Well, China is considering buying or increasing stakes in Russian energy and commodities companies. Here's Bloomberg's Steve Engel.
So what we're hearing here, though, is that Beijing officials have been in talks with their big SOEs in the commodity space. We're talking about Sinopec, CNPC, which is Central China, essentially. We're talking about the aluminum producer Chalco, about buying more stakes, increasing their stakes in the likes of Gazprom. This would not necessarily be in support of Russia, but in support of the main drive by China to be energy sufficient.
Some talks between Chinese and Russian companies have already started. We're told the discussions are at an early stage and won't necessarily lead to any deals.
5 minutes past the hour as we update global news, and it's all about Ukraine. Russian forces have intensified their bombardment of Kyiv. Ed Baxter covering it all from the Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco. Just about all about Ukraine. You're right, Doug. A bombardment from the bulk of the Russian forces, which are about 30 miles away from the city. There are some reports of some isolated fighting inside the city itself. Now, this goes along with what U.S. intelligence officials have been telling the House Intelligence Committee today. Intelligence Director Abel Haynes saying that Vladimir Putin thought the war would end in 2 days, and now it will be more brutal.
Our analysts suspect that Putin is unlikely to be deterred by such setbacks and instead may escalate, essentially doubling down to achieve Ukrainian disarmament and neutrality, to prevent it from further integrating with the U.S. and NATO if it doesn't reach through diplomatic negotiations.
Haynes says if the resistance continues, it may have to change with some kind of face-saving action, though.
We assess Putin feels aggrieved the West does not give him proper deference and perceives this as a war he cannot afford to lose. But what he might be willing to accept as a victory may change over time given the significant cost he is incurring.
Yeah, Haynes says Ukraine and NATO must stand strong. Having said that, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky appeared remotely in front of the U.S. House of Commons to a full-on standing ovation. Zelensky channeling Winston Churchill saying, "We will fight them in the sea, air, forests, fields, and streets. We will not surrender." And U.S. President Joe Biden goes along saying,
Ukraine never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country.
And Poland is sending MiG-29 fighter jets to Germany, what is seen as a precursor to them going to Ukraine. And U.S. Pentagon spokesman John Kirby says it will support efforts with funds and munitions.
We are accelerating and expediting the shipment of arms and materials to Ukraine. In fact, another shipment arrived in Eastern Europe just overnight.
And a footnote to the American people and probably the globe, President Joe Biden is saying the cost of gasoline will go up. The cost, he says, of protecting democracy. HKO1 reporting that Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam will indeed hold their daily virus briefing today. In Hong Kong's plan to test the entire population 3 times this month is in flux as the government is being forced to focus on resources to try and address the COVID death rate that has surged to the highest in the world. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. All right, Eddie, thank you. Let's get to our guest. Sean Darby is with us. He is the Chief Global Equity Strategist at Jefferies, joining us on the line from Hong Kong. Thanks for being with us, Sean. Always a pleasure. Even before the war in Ukraine, I mean, we were concerned about elevated inflation as a result of a lot of the stimulation that global economies received following the pandemic or in the midst of the pandemic. And now we've got this huge spike in commodities. Every market that you can imagine has been on the tear, especially energy. I guess the big question is this durable and do you see it lasting?
No, I don't actually. I think to some extent, even if we didn't have the unfortunate circumstances in the Ukraine, the world was going to find itself with some form of a commodity crunch and higher inflation simply as a result of the reopening. And we should bear in mind that China has, of course, kept to its zero COVID policy, but when it does reopen, it is also going to have a huge demand for commodities. So I would say that we were going to arrive at this same destination maybe 1 year from now, and that the Russian invasion of Ukraine has preempted that. What I would say, though, is that the bond markets have sniffed this out for the best part of the last 9 months. If you look at the consumer surveys in the UK, the GfK, or the Michigan in the US, or even indeed consumer surveys in Japan, they've all been heading down, even though growth was going up. And the long end of the bond market has sniffed at the fact